So location matters, but not as much as people think. Well, they say, well, those franchisees work harder, work longer, have more education. Nope, that's just not the case. McDonald's found that when they installed kiosks, right, and did all this, online ordering and, mobile app stuff, people thought, well, they're going to have a reduction in labor. They're not going to need as many employees. What they found is because they're taking a lot more orders, they actually do need more people, but like in the kitchen.
So what does people business actually mean to you?
So people say, well, AI, it's going to replace human beings. I don't think it's going to replace human beings. I think it's going to replace what human beings are doing. It's going to move human beings away from tasks that can be replaced by technology, but it's going to free human beings up to do the things that really matter. Most of the time, I think it's BS. Most of the time, if people say they're in people business, they're just reciting some cliche, right? I don't think people even know what that means, and certainly it's not reflected in what they do. People don't leave jobs, they leave their managers, and they exit cultures, or they stick around because of leadership and managers and because of the culture. But I don't think most places are thinking of that. They just think of employees as numbers, and they dehumanize them. They don't treat them well. They blame their generation, call them lazy, entitled, and addicted to their screens, right? I remember my manager came in one day and said, hey, I just noticed at that flower shop 2 blocks away, they put a sign out saying that they're now going to sell fruit arrangements. That's how I got my data. My manager drove by a store and saw a sign, right? That's not a way to collect data and information. If you could invent a time machine so I could go back to when I first opened my edible arrangements and use your technology then, that would be awesome.
I can't recall. I recently heard about this authentic retail podcast.
Yeah, I know. It's called Retail, really.
Hi, welcome to episode 2 of the Retail Really podcast. Today, our guest is Scott Greenberg. Scott started as a franchisee operator himself, and he spent most of his career teaching and coaching franchisee operators how to thrive in their own business. He's the author of the book, The Wealthy Franchisee. Today, we're going to talk about how the franchising business is people's business and the human fundamentals of great franchise leadership and how AI changes or doesn't change some of those fundamentals. Scott is also writing his 3rd book on franchising. We'll talk about this in our conversation. So Scott, welcome to Retail Really. We're super excited to have you today as a guest for this episode of the podcast. To kick it off, I really wanted to ask you a couple of questions that just to get the audience to know you a bit better, right? So
Sure,
you've written...
lay it on me.
Right, let's get started. So you've written 2 books on franchising, spoken and coaching and advising some of the biggest brands in the restaurant industry. You were a franchise operator yourself for nearly a decade. So what got you so obsessed with this industry in the first place?
I appreciate your use of the word obsessed. Someone might say that. Yeah, I really love franchising, and I began my career as a straight out motivational speaker. So I've always been tuned into personal growth, that kind of thing. And I would say outside of sports, I'm not sure there's an industry that gives greater insight into human performance than franchising. Because like sports, you have all these people who are doing the same thing, but getting very different results. And that fascinates me. I want to know what is it that gives people an edge in anything. And so in franchising, it's very easy to see that. Yeah, I mean, people have different locations and they believe they know what the big differences are, and often they're wrong. And 9 times out of 10, the difference is the franchisee themselves. So I like franchising because, first of all, it's a great opportunity to make money, and great opportunity where you don't have to invent the wheel. It's been invented for you. You just have to execute. But for me, it's a great place to really better understand human performance and what allows some people to rise above others.
Right. That sounds interesting. That's a really different, a unique take on franchising comparing to sports. Now you're saying it, I kind of see the analogy between the two. That's quite interesting. Even when you and I discussed the topics of this podcast, one thing really stood out is that everybody is saying that restaurant business is really the people business, right? you've spent your entire career defining what that actually means. So you're saying you're training the team, you're learning the leadership skills, disciplining people, building a high performance team within your own restaurants. So what does people business actually mean to you?
Most of the time, I think it's BS. Most of the time, if people say they're in people business, they're just reciting some cliche, right? Like I'll ask an audience all the time of franchises or other organizations, hey, what business are you really in? And invariably, one of the first two or three hands go up and someone says, well, we're in the people business. Everyone says that, but I don't believe it. I don't think people even know what that means. And certainly it's not reflected in what they do. To me, the people business means you use the delivery of your products and services to elevate how you make people feel. You're elevating their emotions, right? Not only through the delivery of products and services, but by the experience you give them. So there's a difference between service and hospitality. You know, customer service means you're meeting the need. You're giving them the thing that they came for, the product or service. But hospitality is being deliberate about how you make them feel along the way. And when you infuse hospitality with customer service, well, now I think that's what people mean when they say the people business, but it's very rarely reflected in what they do.
So in your opinion, people drive restaurant business, right? It's not just the people you serve, like your customers, but also it's about how to motivate your team to kind of drive the business and in turn serve the customers to make them feel better and, creating that hospitable environment. So if you have two identical franchises, right? Similar concept, very similar. They might be far away, the two locations, but very similar, right? Similar structure, operating menu, same percentage of royalties and all that. One is thriving, one is struggling. What is actually the difference that often you see in these type of scenarios?
Well, the joke that I tell, the one that's thriving is the one that's read my book. But a lot of people, but a lot of those top franchisees, they're really doing the things that I talk about in that book, and I talk about that on stage. First of all, let's look at the myths as to why they're different. Myth number one, well, they have a better location. I hear that all the time. And so these locations that are struggling, they say, you know what? My location's a lemon. I'm done. I'm out. And they sell their business cheap to a better franchisee. And very quickly, that franchisee takes that dud location and makes it great. Every franchisor will have that story. So location matters, but not as much as people think. Well, they say, well, those franchisees work harder, work longer, have more education. Nope, that's just not the case. They say, well, those franchisees are always there in the store. Well, I've met so many franchisees who owned scores, hundreds of locations in some cases. They're obviously not in the store, but they're engaged in the business. The real distinction is the franchisee themselves. Of all the different factors that impact performance, the franchisee is either an asset to the business or a liability. Often through those soft skills, like what is their belief system? Do they believe their franchisor is working hard on their behalf, or do they think the franchisor is greedy and doesn't care about them? Well, that belief system is going to impact how quickly they embrace new initiatives, right? Are you out of fear? Are you operating out of courage? Are you operating from a place of continuous improvement or complacency, right? Do you hang on to the way things have always been, or do you embrace change? There's so many differences from person to person, from franchisee to franchisee, and top franchisees have those characteristics and those behaviors that give them an edge with the same business, same products and services, but they infuse it with that edge, and that's why they're doing better.
Right. Let's take technology maybe inside this, the operating model as well. There are definitely a lot of changes in the restaurant business. I think technology is definitely one of them. We have to talk about AI. I think it's by default. We have to talk about AI in any podcast now.
Got it.
So
in any conversation, pretty much, yes.
Right. So AI and the human side, right? Let's chat about that. Is it a threat or is it a tool? How do people use it correctly, embrace it? So the conversation about AI in retail and QSR is, like we said, everywhere now. So what's the version of that conversation that drives you crazy? Because there's a lot of myth, there are a lot of misconceptions about what AI can and cannot do. So what does that sound like to you?
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy talk around it. To me, it's just a tool, right? But there's a certain bandwagon effect. People are like, we got to use AI. It's like, well, that's like saying we need a hammer. Well, what exactly is the thing you're trying to do for which you need a tool? Now, I think there's tons of uses for AI in small businesses, most certainly in restaurants, right? But what's the big objective? The big objective is to make a profit selling products and services and to do it in a way that elevates people's emotions. So they become repeat customers and spokespersons for the brand. So people say, well, AI, it's going to replace human beings. I don't think it's going to replace human beings. I think it's going to replace what human beings are doing. It's going to move human beings away from tasks that can be replaced by technology, but it's going to free human beings up to do the things that really matter. So if I'm a manager, if I've got AI that can help me with my scheduling, that can help me with cost control, that can take tasks, if it gives me time, well, now I have more time to coach my employees, to engage them, to give them feedback, to walk the floor and look for problems and look for opportunities. I now have more focus, more bandwidth to focus on my customers and giving them a better experience. Things that technology and AI can't do as well, right? There's always going to be that human element because we're not just facilitating tasks or transactions. There's human connections that are taking place. That's what elevates us. And so if we can dump all that repetitive kind of work on AI, right, then I have more time. That will improve their businesses and improve their lives.
Yeah, I completely agree with you because the whole point of people coming to a restaurant is for that human connection, is for, getting the service, is to eat the food, talk to their friends, the family, and then also interact with the restaurant staff and everything. So I think AI can do a lot of things, and in restaurants really is to elevate people so that gave them the time and the mind space to be able to connect with people, not to hire less people in a restaurant, probably just to take away the menu work from them.
Yeah, McDonald's found that when they installed kiosks, right, and did all this, online ordering and, mobile app stuff, people thought, well, they're going to have a reduction in labor. They're not going to need as many employees. What they found is because they're taking a lot more orders, they actually do need more people, but like in the kitchen. And so I think what's happening is that it's very disruptive, right? But I think it's just creating shifts as opposed to just destroying things.
Yeah. Do you think there's a real fear in restaurants right now? Is it the owners that fear, or maybe, like you saying, get on the bandwagon effect of, I have to do something to be more effective, efficient, so that I don't need to hire a lot of labor versus, the people who are actually working in restaurants that, how do they feel about this? Do you see that happening in your conversations with customers when you speak to them?
I see it all. I see some people who are terrified of AI, some people who are terrified of not having AI. But in the restaurant space, that's only one thing to be afraid of. People are also afraid of inflation and the rising costs of goods sold and the costs of labor and new labor laws, right? The change in behavior and mindset of new generations who are entering the marketplace. They're concerned about the competition, online ordering, that now you kind of have to be on some of these online delivery platforms that, many say it really cuts into their margins. The restaurant business has always been tough. It's not for everyone. But those who have navigated it well and done it intelligently and have stayed ahead of the curve have done very well. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of fear around it, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't find a way to make it work. And I think a lot of businesses are using technology and AI in particular, and it's going to absolutely give them an edge.
There's an older version of AI that was already there in place. So I think that's also another aspect, is that don't think about the technology, whether it's this new shiny thing that you have to use, but think about the problems that you want it to solve, whether it's your people's problem, whether it's your cost, whether it's your inventory and labor and etc. Right? So that's another thing I think people have to think about, what the problem that they need to solve.
So, at Edible Arrangements, we had to predict how many orders we're going to get on any given day for a holiday. So we had to predict how much fruit we're going to order. We don't want to not have enough, but we don't want to have too much and then have waste, right? And then I needed to know, well, how many employees do I need to hire on any given day, and certainly for holidays, right? I don't want to be in a situation where I'm having to send people home because I overscheduled, or I'm calling people in because I'm desperate. And so if AI can help make those predictions and help me with my scheduling, with ordering products, that kind of thing, I can then operate a lot more efficiently.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. We'll come to that. But one major challenge people face is frontline retention is one of the hardest problems in the QSR business right now. I think on average, your general manager of a store, the tenure is around 8 to 9 months, right? There's multiple different reasons why that is the case. Do you see AI or technology plays a role here? Or is it purely up to the leadership and culture to solve that problem?
I think it's a combination. First of all, the foundation for it is leadership and culture. People don't leave jobs, they leave their managers. And they exit cultures, or they stick around because of leadership and managers and because of the culture. And a lot of people think, well, we just can't pay people more, so they're not going to stick around. That's just simply not true. People will pay more for a better experience, right? Consumers certainly do, but employees will accept less and stay longer for a better experience, right? And so, but how many businesses are actually doing that? Well, where AI fits in is that if you use it as a tool to solve problems, and that gives you the bandwidth to then create a better environment, to give people coaching and feedback and a sense of purpose, they're going to stick around longer, right? That's not such a novel concept, but most people aren't executing on that, right? The only way to create a great customer experience is by creating a great employee experience. But I don't think most places are thinking of that. They just think of employees as numbers, and they dehumanize them. They don't treat them well. They blame their generation, call them lazy, entitled, and addicted to their screens, right? People have been complaining about generations for generations. But I think that usually employee performance is more a reflection of management. And if management uses AI well, that should free them up to be better managers. And I promise you that's going to lead to better retention. That's not just a theory. I wrote a whole book about managing frontline hourly employees, and I profiled a number of business environments, a lot of restaurants that have frontline employees who have great retention, who have great cultures, and who are making a lot of money. They've proven that it can be done. All of them use resources and technology to free themselves up to be better, more engaged managers.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think also technology, because in a restaurant chain, there are going to be, thousands of different locations. Obviously, each franchisee probably manages, a set of them. They own a set of them. But maybe this tool is also leveling the skill set across all the locations, because you do have some locations, maybe the general managers are not as skillful or enthused about the daily work, but giving them directions, giving them a tool to automate some of the tasks, and then also direct them on exactly what they should prioritize. Maybe they're learning, they're in training, they need some coaching. I think that plays a role in the overall health of the brand across all locations as well. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. A huge sector in franchising within restaurants are quick service restaurants, fast food.
Yeah.
And, speed, it's literally built into the name. It's built into the customer expectation. So, and often managers are meant to be working managers on the floor. And so when that lunch hour kicks in, right, or dinner, they're on the move. They're moving fast. And there just isn't a lot of time to coach and engage and motivate employees. And so when there's technology that can take some things off their hands, if they take that time that they've just gotten back and they use it now to better themselves as managers and then to really engage in people management, then I think it's going to make things a lot better. But ultimately, that people management, it has to happen. And a lot of these companies, they don't provide really great training on how to manage people. Because number one, they don't prioritize it. Number two, they don't know it themselves. It's a tall order to really understand a restaurant chain and how to make money and how to scale it. To expect them to be personal growth experts and leadership experts on top of that is too much. But the third reason in the franchise world is these companies are terrified of being called joint employers. So they don't talk about anything HR related because they don't want the government to say, oh, franchisor, you're actually legally responsible for what an employee does who works for that individual franchisee. Franchisor doesn't want that liability. Okay, it's called being a joint employer. So lawyers have told them, stay away from anything related to human resources. Let the franchisees take care of that. But many have interpreted that as don't talk about leadership, don't talk about management. Leave that to the franchisee. So franchisees and their managers are often undertrained in how to be good at that stuff. And so if a franchise is still, reluctant to provide that, well, at least give them tools to give them more time so that they can figure it out.
Yeah. That leads into the next set of questions I wanted to kind of discuss is really just the franchisor versus franchisee relationship, right? That's a very unique business model where the franchisor or the corporate, the brand owns this whole like operating kind of how you operate a restaurant in more defined ways with, their menus and FDDs and everything. And then you have franchisees, they're like independent business owners, but then they have to comply a set of rules. There's a kind of like a very unique dynamic between the two parties. And where do you think the relationship works really well and where does it break down?
Yeah, first of all, it should not work at all. It's a tug of war. There's so much tension that's just built into the relationship itself. You have people who come to it because they want to be independent business owners, but then they have this entity that holds them to standards and keeps them compliant, right? You have one group of people who only make money when there's like bottom line profit, but then the other party, well, they take their money off the top line in the form of royalties or product sales. One that focuses on what's happening locally, one that has to focus on what happens nationally. I mean, that's just a few. There's, each one thinks the other should be doing more marketing. There's just so much tension, but so many brands get it right and they collaborate beautifully. Some, right? And it comes down to the people who are there. So, where it's right is where there's communication, where there's shared tools, where there's trust, where there's faith, and where everybody sees that they're part of a partnership. That if you bought a franchise, you bought into a culture, you bought into something bigger, and you can't just focus on what's happening locally. You have to think about your responsibility for the overall brand, but you have to take responsibility for what's happening locally, to take ownership of your business and not wait for the franchisor to, to take care of things for you. They're there to advise, to teach you the system, help you with marketing, but ultimately it's on you. Franchisor has to recognize the journey of the franchisee, commit to not only their operations and sales, but to their profit. They have to be there for them to, to get their backs, including some tough love, and need to innovate and provide tools to help these franchisees be successful and help them compete against other brands that might be in their territories.
Yeah. Do you think franchisors are doing a great job at really helping the franchisees to grow? Obviously they have a lot on their plate to make sure the brand is well received, the brand equity, they're constantly building the brand per se, and then care about nationally what the strategy will look like, right, at the national level, as you rightly pointed out. But then they don't know every single local market. The whole point of franchising is to get people who know the local market better to run these individual units. So what do you think they're doing well in terms of supporting the franchisees and what they could be doing more, given every location essentially is in a completely different context?
It varies by the brand. Some are brilliant at it and some are terrible at it. I think most are better at it than their franchisees realize. I think some out there are just as bad or even worse as their franchisees realize. But I think most of the ones that have been around that have a decent number of locations really do care about franchisees. But there's only so much they can do. I mean, Michelle, I don't know if you're a car person, but I could be the CEO of Ferrari, right? And I can sell you a Ferrari, right? That is souped up, that has been tested, that has all these amazing features. But I can't control how you drive and how often you clean it and how you maintain it and where you store it, right? There's a limit as to what I can do. So the franchisor, Their job is to provide Ferraris to all these different people, but it's the franchisee's job to then to drive it and to maintain it. And Ferrari can give you ideas and instructions on how to do that and support and tools, but ultimately the franchisee has to do that. I don't believe that. I think there's a lot of franchisees who don't drive their Ferrari as well as they could. And I think some franchisors could do a better job giving some of these driving instructions to the franchisees. And so, the work that I do is about helping franchisees drive their Ferraris better, to understand that there's more they can do with the business that they bought than they're currently doing. That's the main focus of my work. So I think that for the most part, the franchise system works. I think most franchisors do a very good job of helping franchisees, but they don't always help franchisees understand what their role is, and how franchise. But again, there's only so much that they can do. They can't babysit every individual franchise. But getting back to the idea of national versus local.
Yeah.
A franchisor who's based in, New York City, there's no way they're going to know the local market of Tempe, Arizona, more than the franchisee, right?
Yeah.
So it's on the franchisee to take all the tools and determine, how does that apply in Tempe? What's going on? What's the competition? What's the weather? What are all the factors happening here? And how can I take these tools and respond to these factors to make the most of the opportunity?
Yeah, exactly. So if we think about, like, you're rightly so, everybody, franchisor, franchisee, they probably have their responsibilities, and together they make this a great brand and great business. For a franchisee, even if they do get the greatest support from the franchisor, it's a great brand, they have great people, they have great products, they make the operation menu very well constructed so that it helps them to run these restaurants. But still, they can lose customers because, there might be a competitor running a huge promotion better than theirs, smarter than theirs, so that they lose traffic for that day or that week. So for a franchisee, how aware are they to what's happening outside of the four walls, or maybe 4 blocks within the catchment area, especially for multi-unit owners, right? You're the owner, you might not even live the state where your restaurants are running. How do you operate better in terms of getting the local intelligence?
It is so tough getting local intelligence, because when you run these businesses, you're so busy inside your store, like ordering and stocking and managing employees and filling orders and cleaning. And there's just so much that's going on. And hopefully you have a good marketing campaign. One of the again, I'm fortunate to be in a position that I really have my ear to the ground on what's happening in franchising. The main thing that I do is franchisors bring me in to keynote their conventions, and they tell me what their concerns are so that I can give an informed presentation to franchisees. So I hear what the challenges are. And so I think your average franchisee, they're so busy that they're just not aware of what's happening around them, because they don't think to ask, because instead of working, on the business, they work in the business. And so they're not paying enough attention to the competition, to local events, not just to problems, but to opportunities that are happening around them. And, for us, the whole idea is you have a business and you work internally to respond to and serve what's happening externally. So how can you possibly maximize your internal business if you're not aware of and responding to that external environment? So I guess the simple answer to your question is, I think for most franchisees, it's not on their radar enough, the external environment. And that data would be so useful if they can pay attention to it.
Yeah. So how do they collect that local intelligence now? Is it based on just maybe their general managers are more aware of the surroundings, and they might, spend a little bit of time trying to see what's happening? Maybe they're familiar with the area. So I assume there's no systematic way of doing this, especially for a multi-unit owner. If you own like 50, 80 locations, if there's no tool for it, it's going to be extremely difficult to actually anticipate what's happening instead of reacting to what's happening on a daily basis, right? So that's missed revenue opportunities. That's overstaffing, overordering, or stocking out on certain things.
Yeah, look, I was a franchisee for over a decade. We had, our daily orders, and then we'd have seasonal, like holidays, Mother's Day, Valentine's Day. These were times where we could predict there's going to be a huge increase in orders for a period of days. What we would do is guess. We would look at, the previous holiday, or we'd say, well, for, Valentine's Day, February 14th, the orders really start coming in February 12th. If we saw that, January 1st through February 11th, we're up 15%, well, then we guessed that for Valentine's Day, we'll be up 15%. And then, that might be how we predicted how much fruit to order, how many baskets to order, how many people to have on staff. A lot of guessing. In terms of what's happening around us, I remember my manager came in one day and said, hey, I just noticed at that flower shop 2 blocks away, they put a sign out saying that they're now going to sell fruit arrangements. That's how I got my data. My manager drove by a store and saw a sign, right? That's not a way to collect data and information. And so honestly, Michelle, we kind of didn't. We just were busy inside our store and we ran ads, and if we saw the weather, okay, it's going to be, it's summer and they're predicting it's going to be a hot summer. Well, okay, we know that people like to order things with watermelon then. So, right. But it was sort of bigger, broader things. We just didn't have that data. I wish we did. I wish I looked for it. It would have made running my business a lot easier.
Yeah. That's good to hear, because obviously, that's kind of the area we do focus on. So we wanted to make sure that the local franchisees or every store manager or, people who are responsible to overlook, the P&Ls or generating the maximized revenue they can for a local market, to be automatically served up every day on what's happening around them, competitor moves, any kind of demand signals, and what's about to drive traffic to their locations. We're definitely gonna send you some stuff to try out. We are launching this tool, which is free. Anyone can kind of look at a sample of a QSR location and see what's around it and how it will help them to make more local and smarter decisions. So that's, coming.
What I love is, I was going to say,
Sorry.
in addition to your AI technology, if you could invent a time machine so I could go back to when I first opened my edible arrangements and use your technology then, that would be awesome.
All right. We'll try that.
It's a little
That
late
might
for
be
me
a
now, but yeah.
Second order effect that connects directly back to the people business, as we discussed, right?
Yeah, look, as much as, we should be in the people business, we also need to be in the information business. And I think when a brand has the ability to collect data, real-time data, and respond to it, large scale, that just gives you so much leverage. It just makes life so much easier. And so franchisors are in pretty amazing position. Like, if you're really good at the information business, it's going to enable you to be better at the people business.
Yeah, I completely agree. I wanted to ask you, so if you could describe what a truly great franchise operation looks like in 5 years from now, one that has gotten both AI and the people balance right, what does that look like?
I think a successful franchise operation is fast moving, with absolute efficiency, controlling costs, controlling labor in the most automated way possible, so that management is freer, has better quality of life, so they can improve the lives of employees and ultimately customers. I think that business that's doing well in 5 years, they're thriving, they're making money, but it's easier because they have all this data to work from. I don't think it's ever going to be easy, but I think it can be profitable. I think it can be efficient. And I believe in the franchise model, especially ones that embrace every technology to give them an edge.
Yeah. And maybe one last question. So I know you're working on your third book. So what are you trying to figure out that you haven't fully answered yet that we will see in this book? A little bit of like preview, maybe, if you are able to share.
Sure. Oh, do I want to promote my next book? Okay, fine. Yeah, so what I've been figuring out, and again, I write books based off of questions that I have. I don't start off with answers. I start off with questions, what I'm really interested in, want to know more about. And I'm pretty much there with this is really great franchisees. I feel that their self-identity matters. And the great ones identify themselves as CEOs. Whether they use that term or not, they understand this is my business. I have to step up and lead. And so what does that actually look like in terms of how they see their role, the franchisor's role? And so, right. So what this means is they manage themselves, but they also manage the numbers, right? They manage their time, right? They pay a lot of attention to, here's my list of what I'm not going to do today. Here's my list of what I'm going to delegate because my time is valuable. And I'm going to invest my time here because that's where I get the most return on the investment. So how do these people think? How do they behave in a way that's different than other franchisees? So it's CEO thinking for the individual franchise business owner. That idea gets me excited.
Right. I think it's a great topic. I think, instead we're talking about this in this podcast, instead of complaining about the franchisor, there's so much that they can do. Like, be the CEO of your own business. There are a lot of decisions you can make to make this business better, whether it's to deploy the right tools, whether it's to make the operations more efficient, training your staff, making them feel better. We'll keep you posted for sure. Share our progress and hopefully we can connect again when your third book is out. I wanted to see, what that is all about.
Look forward to that conversation.
Yeah, great. I think that's a wrap for the podcast. Scott, again, thank you so much for your time and thank you so much for being on this podcast with me today. It was a great conversation. I can't wait to share what we talked about with our audience. And thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you.